Well, the environment's future isn't looking too bright. That's according to a new CBS poll that finds most Americans feel pessimistic about the environment's future.
Yeah, 57% say it's only going to get worse, and only 12% expect the environment to improve for the next generation. And this comes as we celebrate Earth Day tomorrow.
That's right. CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvanto is following all of this. So, Anthony, what more can you tell us about this poll, and what is driving Americans to feel this way?
Yeah, well, this pessimism isn't just this year. It has been consistent since we've been polling on the environment. So even as people have become more aware of things that you can do and environmental issues and causes, it hasn't really changed. It's been that steady pessimism, and that nothing's really moved the needle. And part of that is that a lot of people feel like they care about the environment, but they don't necessarily have the means to do anything about it. Caring about the environment is one thing, but they say, well, I'd like to help, whether it be that, recycling or other small steps that you can do, or even big things like we can, change what we do with manufacturing and back and forth. There's always arguments around that, but they cost money. And so what we see is people who are wealthier say that they can afford to do the things that might be more environmentally friendly, and people who have less income say they care, but they can't necessarily afford to do anything about it. So it's not just a caring thing the way it's framed, it's often a cost thing. It's often what you can afford to do.
So what about whether or not you have the time to do it? Is time a factor also?
Time is also a resource, right? And if you have, let's say it takes a long time to get to a further grocery store if you want to buy organic, or you want to go and, take that recycling out somewhere, and that's an extra step in your day. A lot of folks don't necessarily have that extra time. So we need to think of money, and we need to think of time as resources, and what can you put towards something that you care about, but not necessarily can actually affect a change or do.
So the Trump administration recently gutted some Obama-era environmental protections. It's interesting that you say that a lot of Americans feel that they would like to do something to make the environment better, but that they lack the means, or perhaps, the issues are related to their jobs, and the jobs are the ones that they have, and if those jobs go away, they can't feed their families, right? But I wonder, in this case, even though Americans generally like less government, if the government can be a factor in helping people care for the environment, like, for example, in Scandinavia, where the governments in those countries take it very, very seriously, and they just make it easier for people to contribute in a positive way to the environment.
Well, here again, you see that balance between something you can care about, and in the case of environmental regulations, for a lot of folks, and in particular for Republicans, who we see in this poll, what they say is, if we encourage more businesses to be able to do what they want to do, maybe it doesn't have as much help for the environment, but I need the job. I need the money. And so it's something you'd like to care about, but the first thing you have to do is feed your family. The first thing you have to do is have that job. And so that takes a higher precedence on your order of what you prioritize. And so that's where you see a lot of folks in this poll say, if you roll back those environmental regulations, they think it helps businesses, but then a lot of folks, in particular Democrats, but also people who have a little more money, and they're able to say, well, that's a bad thing, rolling back those regulations, because we think it'll hurt businesses.
Yeah, and it's not even a global, and I want to make sure that our audience understands, we're not even talking about the global warming phenomena or the science behind that. I just mean, like, when you see that fish are getting strangled by the six-pack plastic that surrounds the six-packs, like fish are dying, or even I read something that the microabrasion soaps that people use that wash away into the sink end up into the ocean, and then fish actually swallow these little plastic balls. And so I'm talking more stuff like that as opposed to the...
Well, on this issue, as with many, when things finally come back home and hit you, that's when you're more likely to go out and try to make a change, or even to care about them. And what we're seeing now, you raised global warming, which is really interesting too. It's not that people don't think it's happening. And in the poll, you see a large majority of people say it's happening. The disagreement comes on what are the causes. And then the causes link back to what you can do. There's a lot of folks, in particular conservatives and Republicans, because it does hew to partisanship.
That's what I was wondering, because we know what the president said along the campaign trail, initially denying global warming altogether. But you're right, the debate now seems to be, are we the ones causing it? And I wondered if it depends, what party you support had an impact on your view on that question.
Right. It does connect back to whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, in part because these are the messages that the parties have been putting out, and so their partisans, they follow that. But a lot of people, most people, say that it's happening. Right? The difference is, okay, what are we going to do about it? If it's happening because people think it's just a cycle of the planet, it just comes and goes, we've had an ice age and we get warming and it goes up and down, there's nothing we can do about it. But then there's an entirely different camp who says that it's man-made, that the bulk of it, and that's more Democrats and more independents who say that. So when you then turn and say, well, what's a political solution here? What's a policy solution? They're going to say, okay, well, that's something we can do through government.
Right. That's
something where we can put measures in place and try to, cut CO2 emissions and et cetera. But it starts with what you think is driving the problem, as opposed to whether or not you just think it is a problem.
That's interesting.
Fascinating poll.
Yeah.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.